the stories, one of the last stories I did that I remember was there had been a fire at an apartment complex in Nashville not long after. This was around the time when I had just become a mother and, you know, had my son. So everything was, you know, pretty emotional at that time for me. But there had been a fire at an apartment complex, and when we were on the scene, the fire department was there, of course, and they told us that the mother and I think 2 of her children had been taken to the hospital. And then we were standing around waiting, you know, to go live and do our report. But then we hear one of the firefighters yell for us to get out of the way. And so I turn, and the firefighter is holding a baby that had been burned. And the baby, I say baby, I think he was maybe 4 or 5, but he had apparently crawled into the sink to try and, you know, douse the fire from his body, or to try and get to some water.
We found that there is, this was the story, there was a priest that was accused of sexual abuse. Okay, after a year in the civil courts, he was not guilty. And after that, many histories became that was a setup from other people into the church to take him out, because he was investigating about where the money goes in at the church. So I can tell you at this moment, maybe this will be the most controversial, but we are in the starting point, so I cannot tell you about that.
I got interested in public relations in college. I was a journalism major, and my first 2 or 3 jobs out of college were working for newspapers. I worked for daily newspapers here in Tennessee. I migrated to covering government and politics, and actually went to work in Washington, D.C. for a United States Senator, where I worked for 8 years. And following that, came to work here at McNeely, Piggott & Fox in public relations. So it seems like it's a very kind of natural arc, career arc for me. I've always been involved in communications, one as a reporter, secondly as an advocate for an individual, in this case a U.S. Senator, and now as a communications advocate for a host of clients.
I kind of rolled over some of that a little earlier, but you know, was in the communications department, and you know, kept my hand in still photography and also, you know, doing television. But the only television we could really do was in the studio. We would you know, stage, you know, live drama for television, 3-camera setups and talk shows and things like that. There really wasn't any electronic field production or any kind of, you know, going out and shooting news or putting together stories out in the field, because they just didn't have the equipment for that. You know, all of that kind of, you know, rolled around and came later. After I went through my little stint with the TVA and doing what that gave me the opportunity to do is put together little stories, little nat sound stories. I didn't realize what I was doing at the time, but we really didn't have reporters, so with sound bites and pictures and music, whatever, I would put together these little stories and we'd send them around.
Society for the Preservation of Barbershop Quartet Singing. And they did a contest that was called This Is My Country, and you were supposed to write an essay about why you loved America. So she insisted that I entered that contest, and I really didn't want to, because my work ethic wasn't quite what it probably should have been. But she convinced me and held me in class and made me write this essay, and I'll always owe her for that. But she even turned it in for me. And then when I went for the job interview, they were looking for guys who would take box scores, so sports box scores, on late Saturday night scores and games coming in. You know, young guys could do that. It was a pretty much, it did take a lot of intelligence to do that job. And he thought that I might be a candidate for that job. So I showed him some of my essays, and before I got ready to leave, he said, "Are you sure there isn't anything else you want to show me?" And I said, "Well, there was this contest called This Is My Country," and he even mentioned it. And I won that contest, and we went down to the Civic Auditorium, and I read my essay as the winner of that contest to the crowd that was there for the performance of all these barbershop quartets that were in town. And he says, "I knew your name was familiar to me. I was one of the judges of that contest."
First started, I was working pretty near into projectionist, switching the station breaks, doing the news, that kind of a thing, doing some lighting in the studio. At that time, news didn't exist. I mean, I was in it really before there was news. We had a guy that would come on 6 o'clock, and he would sit there for 15 minutes, and he would tell the news of the day in Nashville. And if we had any pictures coming over the wire, we would tear the pictures off, put them on the board, put the second camera on the pictures, and rotate one picture to another picture. And that was our newscast. And it wasn't until I got down to Huntsville, Alabama, when Dave Daltrey, the news director down there at the time, was starting to put together the first big news team. This was 1960. And they were going to do a lot of film shooting, and they were going to do, it was all black and white, going into color, and they wanted somebody that sort of understood how to develop color film and color slides. Decided I would like to go out, learn cameras, start shooting news film. You ever shot news? No, well, nobody shot news, so I mean, it didn't really. And
now I would say women probably outnumber men, maybe as much as 2 to 1 in some newsrooms. But the funny thing is, they still aren't in all the decision-making roles. I would like to see some women, instead of just aspiring to be on camera, to aspire to be the person making the decisions and to be in management, news management, and broadcast management across the board. I think that's still a place where women have not made their mark, have not had their voices heard adequately, and really could make a difference in terms of the approach that we take to television news, the coverage, the kind of things that we focus in on, the kind of material that we look at, and the way in which it's produced. I'd love to encourage more women to seek out management jobs and positions as their ultimate career goal.
One of the things that I instill at our training academy when I teach the new recruits is the formula of image and credibility going hand in hand. What I tell the recruits and what I tell our police officers at the same time is that the image that they project day in and day out, on duty and off duty, is perceived by the public to form an opinion of that person's and this agency's credibility. Our image and our credibility are collectively the most important asset that we have. Image and credibility of this law enforcement agency are very, very important.
You're always curious about not just the world, but your neighborhood. You know, and you're curious about things just as you walk to work. If you lose that curiosity and you've got to be able to listen to people and hear their stories. And then you retell them. I mean, it's really kind of, you know, whether you're writing a blog, you're writing a tweet, 140 characters, or you're doing a documentary. You're listening to people and they tell you things, and then you retell it as best you can in an honest and you know, a representation of what they're telling you. Tough part is when, you know, it's a conflict. You got to pick, you know, okay, what's the most important thing about this conflict that I want to tell people so that they understand it? And sometimes you have to leave stuff out, but you want to be able to tell a story, and you got to be able to listen to people, and you got to be curious.